Welcome to episode 5 of the Empathy Exchange. And today I'm really excited to have a conversation with a good and long-term friend of mine who's also experienced the journey of navigating as a family member through seniors care. I'd like to introduce you to Sandra Boyd. She is the Managing Director of Organizational and Talent Development at B. Riley Farber. Sandra brings over 25 years in the leadership and talent development space, spending the last 15 years in leadership roles for nationally recognized human capital firms. Sandra is the published author of 2 books, research papers, articles and columns in national and international magazines and newspapers. Sandra's key passion is helping leaders and employees Sandra's key passion is helping leaders and employees elevate performance through connection. As I mentioned, Sandra's been a residence family member, and she actually had that experience with both her mother and her father. And she's currently on the path again with her husband's mom and dad, her in-laws. And Sandra's also the proud mom of 2 adult children, and we're gonna be talking a bit about the sandwich generation demographic, particularly when we're kind of stuck in the middle, so to speak, with trying to manage our kids and our aging parents' needs. So Sandra, welcome to the Empathy Exchange.
It's great to be here, Deborah. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I also think that it's a great opportunity. Your experience in seniors care has been in the retirement and the assisted living sector. And I think that it's really important opportunity to just have a bit of an inside glimpse into your experience in that journey. So can you just share a little bit about what your experience was, really, I guess, starting with your dad and then your mom, and then we can talk a bit about what your current experience is with your in-laws.
I realized, as I was going through these questions this morning and thinking about being here and speaking with you about this, that I spend most of my career talking about people's careers and leadership, and very comfortably so. However, I realize this is so fresh and so vulnerable and so intimate into a peek into my life. And I really need to say to your audience that this vulnerability can sometimes be hard. So I hope I don't get too teary eyed, and because it is fresh. My mother did just die in September, but my journey started actually in 2013 when my father got ill. We weren't too sure what was wrong, but we knew something was wrong with him. And my dad was a former boxer. He boxed for Ireland. And what we found out through all the tests and everything that he went through, that he had Parkinson, and ultimately he died because of dementia. And at the same time, so 2013, my husband and I are trying to manage this. We recognize that my mother is extremely stressed out, or what we thought was stressed out, with, having to take care of my father. And he liked to escape. And he was always going back to Dublin to see his mother. And that was a really big challenge. We had them in our home. Both my husband and I were working, and we thought that was the best thing. In the back of my head, my mother always said, I never want to go into one of those homes. Mm-hmm. And I think the Irish guilt was playing constantly for me. And, through a series of events and mishaps and trying to get care, it was actually our pharmacist who, because my mother was always losing the medication, who came to us and said, I'm really concerned about your mom. I think there's something else going on other than stress. And I remember it was 2015, we went to see the gerontologist, and my mother was being tested. And she came out and said, Sandra, could you step in for a moment? And gave us the news that both my parents actually had dementia. And at that point, I thinking we both work. My son had just moved away. My daughter was still in college. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to manage 2 parents, medication, doctor's appointments, and the stuff that goes on when you have parents, that whether they're at the beginning or the middle or the end, it's a journey that you just ride the wave. And so my dad died in 2017, and then my mother, who's the dementia didn't go in the same direction. Everybody's different, and I think that's something that we all need to understand. We put them in care, and we recognize that my mother was okay, but in August of this year, she was diagnosed with stage 5 kidney failure, and subsequently died September the 30th. But what was ironic was the night that my mother-in-law actually fell on the Friday night and was taken to hospital, which was the first of 3 falls, which really put her dementia. She has also been diagnosed with dementia, put her dementia and moved it forward quite a bit, which happens with falls. So she's had 3 falls in as many months. But my mother went in on Saturday and never came out. So we've had a long journey of navigating the system and navigating the homes and healthcare just in general.
Yeah. And as it stands right now, your mother-in-law, is she in hospital or is she back in the retirement home?
Yeah, so great. It's a good question. She's still in hospital. She's had 3 falls, so she's been in and out of hospitals. And during the last couple of months, we've taken her from a retirement home in Oakville to more of a memory care facility in Georgetown that my father-in-law can also be with her. Keeping them together is really important. They've been married for 70 years. They're both 93. They'll be 94 this year. She's down the hall, but she will be today. My husband's there moving her back right now to the home. So that's also, getting them in and out of hospital and navigating, the care between the hospital and the home is also, it's a hard part of this journey.
A lot of what you've described is that emotional journey. And there's also some business savvy that's needed in order to work with and through and around the system, because there's lots of systemic challenges. I tend to say that there's a knowledge gap with most families, that they don't know what they don't know and it's not their fault. And I can recall over the years having a number of different conversations, because you're the kind of person who always wants to be able to seek the knowledge to make the right decisions. And it's clearly from your business and your leadership experience in that. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the expectations that you've had as a family member coming in with the different relationships as a daughter and a daughter-in-law, and what you found you were pleasantly surprised with, and what were some of the things that really disappointed you because your expectations and reality did not line up?
I first start by saying that although, I would consider myself a good negotiator, a business leader, as you know, I'm voracious when it comes to reading and researching. It's part of what I do and part of what I love. But when you get into this, you come from a place of emotion and vulnerability and not knowing. And I think that's a place that I had to remove myself from and put on my business hat. So I'll start with the expectations. I guess when I first started, I believed everything. I'll just put that out there. Whatever they told me, because they were professionals, and my emotions and vulnerability was just at an all-time high. And then you're also feeling this sense of guilt. I'm putting my parents in a home, even my mother-in-law, like what she's going, like there's so much guilt, and you're exhausted from, trying to get the diagnosis and all the rest of it. So my expectations were at the beginning that what they were telling me was in fact, that's how it was going to be, or that was the truth. And so I had to adjust that by learning. I mean, it's trial and error. I would say that when we put my parents in a home, and even just recently, my mother-in-law in the home, because we've got siblings involved, and we've got all kinds of other relationships that are involved in this. So that makes it complex. And even though everybody wants the same thing, they want your parents to be safe, they want them to get the best food, the best care, all the rest of it. We all have the same goal in mind, but how we get there and navigate our emotions and navigate our knowledge is a different thing. So one of the biggest things I realized was that the people that are getting you into homes are usually, you're paying. Even with my mother-in-law and memory care and all the rest of it, we're paying for that.
And I just want to clarify, it's full private pay in retirement assisted living memory care. So it can be a bit of a sticker shock number when you first find out what the investment is going to be.
Oh, so first of all, it's horrendous because it's either that or you wait on a waiting list. That 40,000 other people are on there and vying with their families to get into a home that's subsidized. But I think the expectations is that I never set any expectations. I believed everything at face value. And what I would say to anybody that's listening to this call right now is ask, what can I expect from the home? What kind of care? How many hours a day? How many nurses? I would, if there's anything that I could do all over, even for my parents in retirement, is ask more questions and set expectations, and also let them know the expectations of who's going to show up in our family, and have deeper conversations with the staff. I would also advise everybody on this call that when you go into a home, you're to look at a home and decide. I mean, it's grueling. There's choices if you have the financials. There's limited choices if you don't. Is to really is talk to the staff and have conversations with them. Understand, and I think you probably it's just understanding this is a community unto itself. It has its own ecosystem, and you become part of that community. And you need to know, the cleaners, from the cleaners to the PSWs to the nurses, they have backstories. And so understanding when you're making these decisions of who these people are and how they're feeling about their jobs and all the rest, that also becomes important.
Well, I wanted to clarify when you said that you basically took what they said as the truth.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if there's an example of something that you were told or sold that ended up not being actually your experience.
I can give you the most recent expectation is that when my mother-in-law fell, she fell first of all and broke her tailbone. Then she immediately fell right afterwards and broke her pelvic bone. And so we knew that the home where she was, the retirement home where she was, that we can't support the care that she's going to need. And of course, her dementia kicked in full. And so we started shopping around from homes, and we finally decided on one, and they come in and they assess, and they know from the hospital, hopefully you think they know from the hospital, from talking to you, the level of care, that my mother-in-law was going to need. And this is not cheap. This is very expensive. And so our expectation was that they would be looking after her, knowing that she also has a habit. She's very strong. My mother-in-law, up until a year ago, was walking 10,000 steps a day, was doing yoga every day, was playing bridge. I mean, incredible woman. And so this all changed, but she's always looking to get out of her chair or get out of the bed, and she's not aware that how easily she could fall. So when she went into the home, the first day she was in the home, and we were sure, oh yes, we have all this care and we have extra nurses and our ratio's quite high. The first day she was in the home, they were phoning my husband and saying, oh, she keeps getting out of bed. And my husband and I are going, well, that's why she's there, to be safe and to be looked after. And after the third phone call, and then the fourth was she fell again and is in hospital. I think at that point we're going, this is no better than any other care at the level that we're paying for. And we feel that she wasn't assessed properly. And we feel that they didn't do their due due diligence of putting an alarm on the bed, and we don't feel that what they promised was provided in the home. We were there. I think everybody wants to do their best, but the reality is they didn't tell us how short staffed they were until they started phoning us to say, could you come and help out with your mother?
Well, and the importance of really describing that knowledge gap, and there's a whole bunch of assumptions that we make that the information from the hospital is accurate, up to date, being passed over. The home has had a thorough review of it, and sometimes when these moves are reactive because it's a crisis situation, then things are happening really quickly. But I think the real lesson and opportunity here is really highlighting both sides are committed to the best quality care for your mother-in-law. It's how do we get there? And sometimes bringing that approach of clarification and understanding. And sometimes, as a care provider and our excitement to be able to welcome a new family and resident, then sometimes that over-promising can happen without malice, but it can happen. And so I just think it's a really good example because that bad taste that's left in your mouth from that experience. And the other thing it does is, well, if they can't do this, what else can't they do? And then it takes out of that relational bank account because now there's some friction in the relationship, which isn't helpful, right?
There's a gap between the sales process and the actual care process. And no matter where you go, no matter how much money that you're paying, what you need to know is that everywhere is short staffed right now. So setting your own expectations and really asking what, I think it's to get past the individual that is selling you the package and get to the people that are delivering the package
Right.
is most important. And I also feel too is, my husband and I, because we've been on this journey since 2013, and other members of his family, this is the beginning of a journey. So no matter how much, they almost, like me at the beginning, they're always going, oh no, it's going to be okay, this is really great, and look at all the money we're paying, and that equates to the best care, and it's not always that way. And I feel that 99% of the staff that are delivering the care are amazing. I'm in awe of them. And but I do feel there's gaps in the system, and expectations have to be set on both sides, because what it does is it creates, if you don't take the time to understand each other, and having read your book too was very helpful for me on my journey, if you don't take the time to understand each other, that's where the relationship actually falls down, and difficult questions aren't addressed right at the beginning. And setting those expectations at the beginning, during, and after, then that's where and I mean, even after someone dies, like I have had friends, I'm at that age and stage, friends whose parents have died, and they need a week or two to process it before they clean out the room, and they've shown up at the home and the furniture's been moved to the basement, and so they can get somebody else in. So setting expectations through the, from beginning to end, I think is really important.
When families can understand that first 6 to 8 weeks when they move their loved one, whether it's long-term care, retirement, assisted living, memory care, it's an adjustment period. And I think that just that awareness in itself, that there could be, maybe, likely be issues because your loved one's in a new environment. It's a big change for them. Sometimes it can be like a transfer trauma. And the staff are getting to know the likes and dislikes and patterns. And also too, sometimes residents are coming in and their medications being all wonky. Like I can speak with my mom. She was not managing her medications. And then you've got different doctors prescribing different things. So it's almost a bit of a reset that they do. And that's where things can kind of fall off the rails a bit. So I think even being able to say that to a family, just so you know, the first few weeks, we're going to be trying to stabilize and there may be some wonky moments. And I think that if they had said that to you, Sandra, you would have been, okay, well, then a call isn't going to feel out of the blue. It's going to almost be expected, and that there's still going to be some stick handling that we have to do back and forth, right?
adjustment for everybody,
adjustment.
right? So it's
Yeah.
adjustment for you as well. I would agree with everything that you said 110%, you know, because all of that is part of the process. The medication being, you know, especially when they're first going into care, if they're going from their home or from a retirement home where they're not actually administered the medication and they're not taking it properly. Yeah, there's so many pitfalls in the transfers, especially
Yeah.
before they
I mean,
send them.
if we think about it from a business perspective, it's those risk points that need to be
Yes.
mitigated, right?
Yes. Absolutely. And that's, I think that started my journey of putting on my business hat and negotiating and thinking about things and thinking about different and putting on my coach hat, asking the extra questions and saying, so tell me more about that. And what else are you going to do? What other person have you had that have had the same kind of symptoms and how have you helped them? And, my parents, unlike my in-laws, my parents didn't have as much money. So getting the care from the system was something that the extra care in the home was something that I had to do and had to negotiate on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So I've been on both sides of the fence.
So I want to switch gears and talk about the sandwich generation that you and I are both a part of, and particularly with the work that you do with, leadership and talent development, and you certainly are connecting with all sorts of different people in different industries and sectors and different ages and stages. But this sandwich generation, so those of us with either kids at home or adult kids and our elderly parents, where both need a certain amount of support. I think it's a big lie when they say your kid turns 18 and they get off your payroll, right?
Yeah,
And
I
so
think if they told many of us that, we might have decided in different directions. Well, and it's not even financial. It's the emotional support. It's all of that. That you're still a parent. You'll always be a parent. It doesn't matter how old you get.
yeah, so I'm curious if I mean, your own experience, but also with clients that you're working with that may be in this place, and I think our demographic's only getting larger and louder about this. What are some of the challenges or struggles that you're hearing with this demographic dealing with both sides of that spectrum? And perhaps even any successes or tips that they would have and how to be able to support this demographic?
So if I could start with maybe just a little bit of a personal story that's sort of, when my father was diagnosed. I mean, as I said at the beginning, he was always escaping, and he actually went into an Amber Alert. I was taking a lot of time off work, and I'm a leader in a business. I'm sitting on the leadership team, and I was just taking so much time. And I remember I'm in a meeting in a boardroom, what was considered, like a very important meeting. It probably wasn't, but I thought it was a very important meeting. And I looked down at my phone and I'm getting a call from my husband. I'm getting a call from my brother, a call from my sister, and a call from the police. And then a call from the CMHC, I think they called it then, just everybody trying to get a hold of me. And I realized, oh my God, I've just got off of, taking time off because of my dad. And, it just didn't feel like it was being accepted, as if I was saying I had to take time off to look after one of my children. And so I literally in that meeting, I said, oh, I have a really important client that wants to speak to me. I have to step out for a little bit. And I didn't want to say anything because I just felt that if I said something, it would impact my career. And what I learned, in that moment, my father actually had taken the car from the driveway and was gone for 12 hours. Thank God he never got in an accident, other than the accident was, with an object. But and ended up, we lived in Rockwood at the time and ended up in Scarborough. But what I recognized from that, and when I started saying to people, I'm going through this. Oh my God, so am I. It was like this secret. And what I started feeling in back then, and I think we've gotten better now because there's more of us. What I felt back then was you had to keep it under the radar because it was going to impact your career. And oh God, look at Sandra again. Like, I feel sorry for her, but we can't we can't depend on her in her career because she's always running off to the hospital with her father or mother, and she's got all this going on and it's impacting her performance. And so you could feel that. And other people that I spoke to, were feeling the same thing. And, so the support didn't seem to be there because we'd gotten to that point where we really understood, parents had daycare issues and everybody was rallying around that. So fast forward, I feel that it shifted me as a leader also, because I remember as a younger leader, I was not very caring and understanding and empathetic in regards to
Mhm.
people that were running off to look after their parents. And, fast forward to this, to now, what I would say to all leaders that are dealing with people, like this, be very, very careful, because your life can change in one phone call too, whether it's an aunt,
Mhm.
an uncle, a mother, or father. And I think organizations have to recognize also that women have play a unique role in all of this in the workplace. That women are usually, I'm not saying all the time, I mean, I would say my husband's an exception to the rule, but women are absolutely, for most part, whether it doesn't matter if they're sitting in the executive office or they're sitting anywhere else in the business, they're for the most part looking after all of this. They're dealing with the hospitals, they're running to take care of their parents. Organizations really need to recognize that part of their support, it's the same. If somebody gets a call from their daycare, they're going to stop a meeting and get on that call, or the children's school. It needs to be recognized. If I get a call from my parents' home, uh, that I should be allowed to feel as comfortable saying, I've got to deal with this right in the moment. So the awareness, I think, is really important. Having more discussions around people that are taking care of elderly parents. So if you're going to be an organization to attract and retain top talent, you need to also start thinking about, how do you support these people while they're going through this? I have individuals on my team that are actually also going through it as well. I feel like I'm much more enlightened because I've lived the experience, but I think there's some education that needs to happen. I think they need to hear corporate, HR and other leaders who have never dealt with it, or maybe they're younger leaders. They need to recognize and hear the stories of what it's like to deal with elderly parents in the system, whether it's in the hospitals or getting them back into the home, and how that impacts their lives. I think awareness, education, empathy, understanding is
Well,
important.
and we know that over the next 20 years, the baby boomer, uh, demographics is only going to expand more and more. And I think the other thing that I pulled from what you just shared, Sandra, is when I think about staff working in seniors care, and staff can have narratives about families and families have narratives about staff, is that sometimes when families aren't there as often as the staff would like to see them, there can be some judgment around, "Oh, they must be too busy," and sometimes, and that may have just been the narrative I was saying in my head, when I wasn't always able to be there every day because I was working full time and my 2 kids were still young and at home. But it's that understanding that sometimes it's not that family members don't wanna be more engaged, it's that they've got a lot on the go, and managing a career can be a big part of that. And so part of that empathy exchange is understanding for each other. And sometimes as families, when we're coming in and we may be having a narrative that the staff just looks exhausted or not really into their job today, we don't know if they have elderly parents or childcare issues or other issues going on in their lives, that if we just had a little bit of better understanding and grace for each other, it would really help in that relationship as well.
Oh my God, Deborah. First of all, I just want to give a big shout out for anybody that works in the homes, whether it's long term or it's retirement homes. And you're absolutely right. It is a community, as I said before. I just want to start that once you get to know people and you stop to ask them how their day's going, what's going on, you find out that half of them have people They have parents or family members in homes. It's absolutely incredible. They understand your pain, and top of that, they're exhausted with their what they're doing every single
Yeah.
day. It's exhausting. It's hard work. When you get to know I knew everybody's story. I would stop and talk to everybody, and my sister the same thing. Wow, what a difference that makes, because it's going to help you in the long run. But back to your original question, in regards to that judgment of, Sandra's not there as much. It was really hard when both my husband and I were working to be, we'd be in the hospital or in the home, or my mother'd have an issue, or my father'd have an issue. We'd be on the phone going, okay, who's going to do it this time? Because there was only the two of us. My sister lived 5 hours away at that time. I mean, she has since moved here. My brother, for various reasons, was not engaged, although he lived closer. He was not engaged in the care. So it just came down to my husband and I, both full-time jobs, and then we have children. Showing up, we did our best on the weekends, but it was exhausting. There were sometimes when I had to say, I can't go this weekend because I'm so tired. And you want everybody to rally, but I think in a situation like this, everybody's doing the best that they can. And I could feel sometimes the eyes on me, like, okay, your mom's been really sick. Where have you been for the last week? And well, actually, I was traveling and I was doing this and I was doing that. And even though I wanted to be here, I couldn't. And my husband was looking after, our kids, our daughter, or it was just, it's really complex and it's really complicated. And I would say that's why self-care is probably, I think we all have to start with that and learn and work from there, because this is, and I said to my sister-in-law, who's just at the beginning of the journey right now with my in-laws, is that this is, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and you have no idea what's going to happen from one day to the next. You have to breathe and you have to take care of yourself on this journey. So,
And part of the challenge that just comes to mind for me in that is that if we've never been through the journey before, we don't know what the disease trajectory is. Sometimes we can have unrealistic expectations about our loved one getting better. And then that puts pressure on the situation where it may be that this is the beginning of a slow downward journey, and then how to deal with that emotionally. A final question for you. When we are in really an intimate relationship with those who've dedicated their careers to take care of our parents and spouses and loved ones, what was the most memorable and positive experience that comes to mind that you still feel grateful for?
I hope I don't cry when you tell me this, when I tell you this or talk about it. My mom was dying. The first home that my mother was in, my parents were in, was not, wasn't a good home. And then we put my mother in a second home. And if I could say the name, it's Stone Lodge in Guelph. And they were unbelievable community. When my mother got diagnosed, and she loved it there. She actually came out of her shell. I almost some days felt like she didn't have dementia or she wasn't sick, because she was so happy. She had friends, and it was just, and the people there, and one of the nurses was Irish, and my mother's Irish, and just the manager, Cherry, like just the love and the kindness, and they were always there, and they knew us and we knew them. And the day that my mother was being taken away, there was a gap getting my mother into palliative care, and they literally looked after her, and they were there constantly with us, emotional. Sorry. It's the day she was leaving, and she was in the wheelchair, and they were taking her out. They all came out. The cook brought her tea. Mother drinks more tea than anybody you can ever imagine. Even though she was at the end of her life, she still had to have a cup of tea, and they knew it because they would bring her cups of tea, and her favorite treats, and they all gathered around, came out. They were there for us. They were for my mom, and it was just, and they phoned us constantly to see how she was, and they were invested. And when we went to say that she had passed, they were all in tears. They had lost somebody
Mhm.
too in their community. You can't underestimate how they're feeling about what's going on. And they have their relationship, like relationships that sometimes was better than I had, that my sister and I had, when my mother was driving us absolutely crazy with her demands, or they were there to be much more patient. I mean, daughters and mothers have complicated relationships. So that caring and that kindness was, I it was a gift.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sandra, for sharing that, and I it is hard and it is fresh, and I just so appreciate your vulnerability and your openness to sharing your experience, and as with most families, there's the ups and the downs, but it really truly is the incredible work of staff that make those moments that matter, and I think that's a good place to end our conversation for today, so thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank you, Deborah.
And remember, there is power in your presence, so make your presence matter.